Hi y'all, and welcome back to the garden. We are under a drought, and I've talked about this for a couple videos, but I've not shown you the garden so much since I got back from GardenCom a couple weeks ago. There are some plants that are really stressed. A lot of those are my more established trees because they're not on necessarily drip irrigation. This one that is above the hydrangea trial bed is looking the worst at the top of it. Let's see if I can get back and you can see it here. See it browning up there and the leaves are falling off. It did this thing last year too because we didn't get a whole lot of rain last year in September and August either. But most parts of Ohio are in some of the worst drought it's seen in decades. And several counties in southeast Ohio have been declared natural disaster areas. When I say several, I mean tens to 20 of counties. So it's really bad. I've been underwatering. You can see this tripod sprinkler here, this maple. It's been an interesting year. If you're a first-year gardener, I posted something on Instagram last week that it's just been a tough year. So if you were not successful this year, don't give up. Try again next year. Here where I'm at, we have had record rainfall. When I was in Minnesota, we got over 5 inches of rain just in a couple days, which was a record. And then now we're in a drought, a record drought. So we have had records all throughout the year that's made it really difficult to be a gardener. And if you're new and don't have all the tools in your tool belt yet to learn how to deal with those things, try again next year and learn over winter, and it'll be a great, you'll have much more success next year. And every challenge you face teaches you something new for you to proceed the next gardening season and do better. I've even dragged out my hoses and I've been watering besides the big trees, the little ones as well. The little ones don't look quite as bad. They could have looked better if I was watering them more regularly or they were on drip irrigation, but not necessarily, because I'm going to show you one that I planted last year. It is this Crimson Century maple in this flower bed. While I was gone to Michigan a couple weeks ago, it got really burnt, and it's been on drip irrigation every day when it was running, and it still got pretty crispy. So sometimes those things just happen. Before we head over there, I am going to be putting out my last shipment of beneficial insects from Heirloom Roses. If you participated in that program last year, I would like to know what your thoughts on it were. I have actually found them really beneficial, one might say. I have not seen any insect pressure on my roses. There were a few Japanese beetles here and there, but I didn't notice them causing any damages to my roses. We don't have a huge problem with it here. I did my first year of gardening at the last house, but it was a very unusual year, I think. Since that time, I've not seen a whole lot of damage on them. And to my understanding, there's not really any beneficial insects for Japanese beetles. So you may have to end up using a systemic or some other approach in that case. Other than actual disease like black spot from the record rainfall we had that week and our high humidity this year, I've not had any other really insect pressure, which is nice. And I've been able to see some of the first lacewings ever. I've really never noticed lacewings in my garden. And I've seen them in the garden since putting out this beneficial insect program. So I'm going to push these around the garden, in the cut flower garden, around the front garden as we talk, and then we'll show you around some of the plants and how they're doing. So this rose is Distant Drums, and I'm liking these fall blooms more than I like the ones in the spring. They're showing much more of their usual color, which is a orange combined with a pink. They had come out earlier this year more pink. You can see there's virtually no insect damage on these. I've had one of these beneficial insect packets on it all year, and I'm going to replace it now that I'm here. But I do have a little bit of black spot that I could use some copper fungicide on if I came on and sprayed that. Because things are so dry and kind of desperate right now, I'm not super concerned about it, but it would be a good time to treat those things because it is so dry. We have about a month to a month and a half of our season left, and so I'm kind of in a point where I'm not addressing a lot of issues. But black spot is something you might want to take care of, because if the leaves stick around till next year on the ground, you can see there's some under here that I need to clean up. It could come and black spot could come back up in your garden next year. So rose leaves that fall on the ground, you always want to clean up so diseases do not persist from year to year. You can see this big gap where I removed the Cleome. I am getting in some shrubs from Proven Winners today. I'm going to shoot a separate video on that because it's so cool this morning. I wanted to get out here before it gets so hot because it's not only lack of rain right now, but it's been really high temperatures for us this time of year. Upper 80s with extreme humidity, and you can see the soybeans over there in the field. They went from green to brown in a week, and they've already started harvesting them down the street, which is a little early, I think. But here is the Crimson Century Maple I wanted to show you. So despite being on drip irrigation, you can see that heat, extreme heat we had while I was in Michigan really toasted these leaves, and even got some of these Dark Side of the Moon Astilbe, which are also on drip irrigation and had done fine in full sun all year. So things are a little stressed right now, still giving them enough water or lots of water. Some things, it doesn't matter how much water you give them, even as I mentioned, the really well-established trees like that maple over there, 25 to 30 years old, and it's still very stressed out right now. When something is that big, there's no possibility to give it enough water usually, unless you get some rainfall. This is my Poet's Wife rose, and the foliage on it is also looking really good. It's not actually showing any signs of black spot, which is nice. This is one of my favorite roses from the last garden. I put it up here next to the front of the driveway so everyone could see it when they come in. It's not pushing as much new growth this fall as I had hoped it would, but typically temperatures have cooled off a little bit and plants are triggered to start producing a little more growth. And because it's not, they're slowing that up a little bit this year. My Let's Dance Can Do hydrangeas are blooming really well. You can see, even though I treated them with aluminum sulfate, they're still pink. That's just what we deal with here. I have tried all sorts of things this year on some of my hydrangeas to turn them blue, and I just can't do it. So next year I'm still searching. I think I'm going to end up with a Tractor Supply product to broadly cast some sulfur across these beds after I do a pH test to bring down the pH of the bed overall, so that also some of the iron in the soil can be soluble and break down and the plants can access it, because I've had a lot of issues with chlorosis with some of these plants this year, and it's probably just because the pH is higher. The lavender down here has done incredible this year, and I really like the way it looks. This is underneath it is Artist Blue Ageratum, which is almost exactly the same color. I really like it there. I may repeat that next year, or I may put something different so there's a little more contrast. This container's looking rough, and I'm going to probably pull it out today and replace it with a mum potentially. The Snow Princess Alyssum looks awful in here, and it also looks really bad in the ground. So I'm going to be pulling this out as well today. I don't know if it got some type of disease or what, but since both of them are doing the same thing at the same time, I don't think it's a water issue. I originally thought it might be a water issue, but the leaves look like it kind of has some type of mildew. And this started declining when we got all that rain as well. So could have been just disease that came up during that time, and I didn't do any sprays or anything for any type of disease on annuals. I'm going to be replacing these, I think, with some of the Proven Winners smaller shrubs that I'm getting in today. So follow along on that next video, and I'll be pulling these up and replacing them with, I'm not sure what I'm going to use yet. I'm thinking about some inkberry hollies for some evergreen interest here, but I'm still thinking about it. The Rise Up Amberway roses are looking incredible. Look at this Super Tunia Vista Bubblegum under here too. Really nice. But they took really nicely to that pruning I did and have thickened up so much you can't even see the trellis in some parts. Not produced a ton of buds yet, but I did cut a bunch off. And so it's getting ready to, I'm sure, but I need to come through and tie it up a little more. We've got a bloom up here. It's kind of hidden behind the trellis there. You can see it a little bit right there. But this rose has also had virtually no problems. You can see no disease on it. There's no insect damage either. And I've just been really blown away with its vigor and its hardiness so far. I'm hopeful that it will remain evergreen on this arch this year. Last year it stayed evergreen against the house, but now that it'll be a little further up the trellis and receive a little less protection, we'll see what happens there, but I'm really excited to see what this looks like in winter. The 𝗣𝗏𝗏 River is looking pretty good. A lot of the varieties have spread out. Because of the heat this year, they have struggled a little bit, particularly the yellow variety. Typically those plants like a little more shade, but I'm giving them a lot of sun and a lot of water. These are new variety of 𝗣𝗏𝗏 that can take more sun. I just think the yellow needs to root in a little more. So I'm excited to see how these explode next year. Not unexpected, but Red Rover, which I told you is one of my favorite 𝗣𝗏𝗏𝗏, it's a hybrid between a 𝗣𝗏𝗏 and a 𝗖𝗢𝗏𝗏, is performing almost the best in most instances, and it's this one right here. Really, really pretty 𝗣𝗏𝗏𝗏, and I'm really excited about seeing it proliferate in this area. So 𝗣𝗏𝗏𝗏, after they have their first winter, tend to explode the next spring. So most of them in Southwest Ohio will be little evergreen. You kind of have to clean them up a bit in spring, or you can just wait long enough, and oftentimes that new growth will push over the old growth and you won't even be able to tell it. But I'll probably come through this spring and clip off some of the old seed heads or old bloom stalks here, because those aren't so cute, but it'll look nice in 6 more months. Really good. This dogwood got kind of burnt. Dogwoods this year, this one was curling earlier, and I think it was just the early heat. And then after we had that heat spell a couple weeks ago, it looks even worse. But these leaves are about to fall off in another month and a half anyway, and it'll be stronger next year, hopefully, with more water and more root system. Overall, I'm happy with the performance of a lot of my perennials, this year being their first year. Most of them are short or smaller than they will be next year, but it's exciting to see how well they did this year, because I'm not used to perennials performing this well their first year planted. Some of the newer boxwoods, like this big one I planted this year, has struggled a little bit with the heat as well. It's getting plenty of water though, but I've been keeping a spider mite packet back here on the bag. This is a Californicus variety of beneficial insect, and its favorite thing is spider mites. And so to keep my boxwoods protected, I've been using this hidden on the back to proliferate throughout the boxwood and keep those things under control. You can see I just opened this beneficial wasp packet here, and you can see the wasps taking off after you open it, because when they arrive, they're dormant from being cold in the packet that they come in, but then they crawl out of the back of this little sachet here and take off into the garden, so it's really fun to watch. And they'll go out and lay eggs in bad insects, and then those eggs will hatch and their lifespan will proliferate throughout the garden throughout the season. There are some methods to ensure that your beneficials stick around throughout the next year. I'm not up to date on all of those methods, but you can buy like the insect houses. You can also not clean up your fall garden and leave the leaves and all sorts of little crevices and perennials standing for bugs to harvest over in. Of course, if you have any disease issues around plants, you want to clean those up so you're not proliferating those into the next year like the roses I mentioned. But just keeping everything kind of a little lax over winter until spring rolls around and those things wake up again, we'll proliferate those over the season into the next gardening season for you some. Henry Studios, which actually I got the fountain from, so they make a lot of concrete material, as you probably know by now. They have a gorgeous, I want to order it for next year from my local fountain supplier. It's a concrete native bee stand. It's like wavy and it's very artistic, and it has holes drilled in it. They might be copper, not sure what they're made out of, so you can clean the cocoons out if you need to. But it's really stunning, and I want to grab one and order it for next year. I got to figure out how much it costs. But I do have native bee houses. I've set them down here for now because I got to hang them for fall. But I love native bees. They're so nice early in spring to get out and pollinate things. They're friendly. They're not going to bother you a whole lot. But having just a native bee house is something really nice that you could look into. You can buy, they have some from Costco that are wood. They last a couple seasons. They kind of look kind of ratty after a few seasons, but they still do their job until they start falling apart. I purchased one from a polywood material on Etsy a few months ago in the spring, actually, when my native bees started coming out, so they would move into that house. And I really like it because it'll last much longer for me, and it still does the job perfectly fine that a wood one would. So I got to think of a ground cover to come here and plant in this bed, I think. I don't want to continuously have to mulch this. A lot of the plants in this bed, well, not the ones at the front. The ones at the front are the little spark spirea, so it stays tiny, and this is the sapphire surf bluebeard that I showed you a while back that even this morning is covered up with bees. There's a little bee getting some pollen and nectar this morning. But there's a lot of gaps in the back because this is like a pinpoint blue cypress, and then we have a hydrangea quickfire fab. This is the viburnum that I'm testing. It's only hardy to zone 7, called yard line. You can see it got burnt a little bit too when the hot weather, because this is south facing. This is a brutal location for lots of plants, because after it comes out of this shade right here for the morning, and this tree right here, which is also starting to turn yellow, my linden, due to the heat and drought, and it's already dropping a lot of leaves. These are exposed all day to a lot of heat, reflective heat from the brick and the sun, until late afternoon when the sun goes behind the barn over there. So this is a brutal location, but I want to find something nice to put in here, and I think I really like sedum, ground cover sedums, and so I think I'm going to start some of those, and that would be really nice to fill in cracks and crevices around these rocks. I'm supposed to be getting an Eden climber rose in next week too, and I originally mentioned putting it here on a trellis, but I've changed my mind. I think I'm going to put it, you can see there's a banana tree over there next to the barn. I'm going to put it on that fence there, because the banana tree, this is its first year, so it may grow a little quicker next year, but it started so slow this year that I think I can train a rose along that fence line there and still have some pretty spring blooms and then some later blooms as well. And the reason I changed my mind is after going to Michigan a couple weeks ago and realizing how big this dogwood gets. This is the Sgt. Pepper dogwood, and it's going to get really massive, so it may completely cover this area, and I don't want to have to remove anything like a rose that's establishing, especially a climbing one, later. And so the upright structure won't be there, but I'm also going to have an upright structure on this honeysuckle here. This is Kintzley Ghost, and so I didn't want too much like trellis right here in this bed so close to each other. So there's some other things coming in within the next couple weeks that are going to be really exciting to interplant in these areas that I can't wait to show you. And I'm hoping most everything arrives next week so we can get started in planting. I'm not worried about planting this stuff in these beds because I have drip irrigation. I did mention a couple weeks ago wanting to plant my trees, but I can't plant my trees with the drought we're having right now. It would be really hard for me to keep them watered enough with absolutely zero rainfall, and the forecast shows no rainfall for the next 10 days. And they're doing so good right now, getting their overhead water in the shrub bay, as I call it. So I'm going to wait, and hopefully the weather will start cooling off a little bit. It would not be my preferred idea to plant them in October, but they'll do much better if the temperatures are more mild than they would if I stuck them out and it's 90 degrees, super high humidity with no rainfall. And the surrounding ground is so dry, even if I watered them, the surrounding ground would just suck all that water away from the plant anyway. So I'm waiting on the trees a little longer than I'd wanted to. I did drag some of them out on my gorilla cart a couple weekends ago to kind of see where I wanted to put them out here. And I've got an idea, but I'm also waiting for some other trees before I fully finalize where I'm going to put them. And then I'll probably just drive some stakes in the ground and label them for when I do get ready to plant them. I'll be ready to go and know where I can dig my hole. So let's take a look at some of the roses in my cut flower garden and see how they're doing. Most of them are doing okay. The David Alston's, particularly this Lady of Shalott, is doing the same thing it did at my last garden. You need a lot of room for this rose. And when I originally planted it at my last garden, I had to relocate it because I didn't realize how quickly it grew, one, and how sprawling it is. So the stems on this rose aren't super strong, and it has this really arching habit, as you can see here from this one, and it's already taking up 4 foot of space this way, and if anyone's come out that way, it'll do the same thing. So that's something you have to watch for on this one, but the roses are really beautiful and they smell really nice. This one's a little aged, so it looks kind of rough, but I love this orange color on them. I'm going to put a beneficial insect packet on it while I'm over here, just to make sure these stay healthy for the rest of the season. Like I said, these look fine too. They don't have a whole lot of disease on them other than like black spot. So I think the beneficial insect packet's working really well in these cases. Parfuma Madame Anisette is also one I'm going to have to trim back a little bit. It's got really long canes that are kind of leaning towards the inside of the flower bed when most of the others are pretty upright. It's not produced a ton of buds yet this fall. I expect more bloom when the weather cools off a little bit, because some of the others are producing stunning blooms their first year. I never would have guessed that this is apricots and cream, by the way, would have produced blooms that are this big its first year planted in the ground. I mean, I planted these early May. I think I received them late May or late April, the last week of April, and so stunning blooms there on this first year rose. And look how glossy the foliage is. That's what I really love about this variety. There's a little bit of black spot down there at the bottom, but otherwise insect free. Now, Coco Loco, bless its heart, I've heard this one takes a while to get established before it starts doing anything. And out of all the roses that I planted, even though this one's getting regular water, this has been the slowest to get started this season. I do think it got nipped by a deer. There's some clipping here that indicates I didn't clip on it, and I think a deer come through and nipped these last 3 here. But out of all of them that recovered, this one has not recovered quite as well. So this one should come back fine next year. I've just heard it's slow to get started, so if you buy it, recognize that. But I want to show you Plum Perfect. I posted it to an Instagram story I think it was last week or a couple weeks ago. Look at the number of blooms this thing has produced this fall. It didn't produce any blooms in the spring. Like I said, I think it was also clipped by a deer, but it has recovered wonderfully. And it produced all these blooms. These are looking a little rough now, but even a week later after they had bloomed out, they still looked pretty good. But these are new, and it's got a ton more buds on it that it's producing already. And you know, I never expected myself to be a fan of purple roses, but I think because I love this one so much and it's such dark glossy foliage, that I might have to tuck one of these up front in the front flower bed too, because this is a very cool bloom color that not a whole lot of roses offer. While we're here, I just want to show you this Mahogany Splendor Hibiscus, because if you plant Mahogany Splendor Hibiscus, this is how it's going to behave a little bit. So these are massive. There are 3 plants here, 1 here, 2, 3, and it's taking up way more space than I expected it to in this cut flower garden. I don't know that I'll grow but 1 next year. If you're using it for cut foliage, you probably only need 1 because they're so prolific. And I haven't cut a whole lot on it this year. It's really beautiful. If you want a Japanese maple alternative that's an annual in your garden, this is a really nice one. But it is a beast, so give it enough room. I would say give it at least 4 to 5 foot tall and wide if you're growing it from seed, depending on how long your growing zone is. These I purchased this year with my annuals, and so they were a little more progressed than if I had started them from seed. So if I grew them from seed myself, they would have probably not gotten quite this big. And we also had some really heavy storms that blew these over. So the problem getting these removed is really difficult in the fall because the stems get so thick and woody, almost like trees. Small trees are actually real sized Japanese maples, and they become difficult to get in there and clean up. So I'll probably wait until these get frosted and all the leaves fall off of them so I can get in here with some loppers and cut these down to the ground and dig them up. My dahlias are doing pretty good. I have not been in here to cut anything off of them because it's just been so darn hot and I need to. I did come through here and tie some of these up earlier in spring, next year, I didn't have a great understanding of how tall some of these got, even though they were listed at a certain height, and I placed the trellises too high. And so when I cut these back in the fall, I'm going to go ahead and come through and lower these trellises so I know the appropriate height for them. Hopefully, I'm going to cover them up with mulch really heavily. I might tarp them to keep them a little drier. The soil back here is not so much heavy clay, so it won't hold as much water as clay traditionally would, which would cause tubers to rot. Dahlias are not perennial here typically, but I have had them come back successfully in raised beds. So I think if they're in the ground and heavily mulched, they might do perfectly fine. And I would like for these to come back this year or next year, at least some of them. I may not tarp this one here. I don't remember the name of this one. It's a white one. And I had a viewer mention and said they don't love this variety, and I don't love it either. It's been really scraggly all over the ground. The blooms are so tiny and the stems have been so short. They've been almost unusable, and I'm not sure I've even clipped on them that much. So I might not cover this one and see if it survives as a test, but I like all of these others. They've been really nice and beautiful in arrangements. I am so excited to get plants in this coming week and fill out these spaces. When I started intermingling more of these plants in here so you could just have more contrast between the things I planted, this planting space made me a whole lot more excited, and I just really like how some of it's coming together, and I'm excited about what it's going to look next year. So I have lots of space to fill in to make this a beautiful place to see next year, and because of all the textures of the things I've ordered, I'm really just genuinely happy about how I think it's going to come out. The flowerful hydrangeas are still pushing those buds, and they've gotten much bigger now, which I'm excited about. This Carolina Sweetheart red bud, look how good that's looking since I staked it up. I love those layers that this is adding to this space. And the rose wall that I planted, this is 𝗩𝗜𝗗𝗘𝗦 by David Alston from 𝗩𝗜𝗗𝗘𝗧𝗦.com that I planted in probably June or July, is looking incredible. It continues to push an absolute insane amount of growth. So these are growing so quickly. And I realized last week, or within the past week, that I had accidentally shut the water off for these for I don't know how long. So they had no water for at least weeks. I don't remember when I was tinkering with the water to have accidentally cut them off, and they were still pushing a ton of growth. But since I actually put water on them, they looked fine during that time. They weren't getting no water aside from the drought. All this new red, delicious looking growth has been pushed. So going to be getting some more blooms off of these, I think, for fall, even though it has literally bloomed nonstop since I planted it. It may not be a huge flush of blooms at one time, but it's produced 1 or 2 blooms. Like, look at these. They are so ruffly, so gorgeous, and smell really nice. And if you're new here, I am a brand ambassador for Heirloom Roses, and there's a coupon in all the descriptions of my video this year. It's a direct link that will take you directly to their website and apply the coupon to roses in the cart there. So if you're looking to pick up anything to plant for fall, you can get a discount that way. All right, I'm going to turn on the sprinkler to water this tree this morning underneath it so it can soak this up and have a little bit of reprieve, hopefully, from the heat that is today as well. Let this be a reminder that if you planted any trees this year or last year or the year before and you're in any drought conditions and not getting water, or even if you're got perfect rainfall, to make sure you're giving those trees enough water as they head into fall, because that's critical. When they go dormant, if they're not in a good state to begin with, they may not make it through winter. Thank y'all for following along on this video. Check out the next one when my Proven Winners order arrives, which I think should be the next couple of hours. So I'm really excited about that. Thank y'all, and remember, be a light. Take care. Bye.